Hello, everyone. Let's discuss a paper soon after reading it. And what we do is we read the paper within less than 2 hours and then meet here on Zoom meeting and discuss our questions and ideas about this paper. And first, let us introduce ourselves. So, Yota, please.
Hi, my name is Yota Kawashima. I'm a research assistant at ATL Japan and Monash University, Australia.
Thank you. And Ryoichi?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Ryoichi Watanabe at Kyoto University and a PhD student.
Thank you. And I'm Aniko Kustor. I'm a PhD student at Monash University. And today I will summarize the paper. So we have read the paper titled Back to Square One, The Bodily Roots of Conscious Experiences in Early Life. It was written by Anna Ciaunica. I hope I pronounced this right. Anna Ciaunica, Adam Saffron, and Jonathan Delafield-Butt. And this paper was published in the journal Neuroscience of Consciousness. So this paper basically kind of an opinion piece, or it's kind of like a review and brings up or provides a new perspective on consciousness research. The authors start by pointing out that much of consciousness research is focusing on adult subjects, adult participants, and many experiments are vision-based. And most of the research is focusing on this kind of visual experiences and the reports about them. However, it might be very fruitful to actually look into and examine the origins of consciousness in humans by looking at subjective experiences through a developmental lens, so to say, and examining early life, like basically childhood, or actually even earlier, the fetal or fetus's potential subjective experience. And this perspective may offer a lot of interesting insights or potential new ideas. So the authors basically argue for the importance of several things. First, the fact that the experience is about, or it's a very important aspect of the experience is that it has a subject, it is experienced by someone, or it has a bearer. So in that way, there's always someone experiencing any kind of experience. And it's also important that at least in human consciousness, there's this idea that consciousness is embodied, meaning that, it's important to kind of pay attention to the embodied perspective, and to examine consciousness not just as a brain without any relation to the body in itself, but actually focusing on the fact that consciousness is based on and kind of inherently influenced by bodily signals and how the body interacts with the environment. And they also emphasize the importance of internal models. So when we are discussing internal models of either the self, the body, or the environment, we must remember that these internal models, the basis of these internal models, are formed in the early developmental stages. So the authors, they bring up several very interesting points. They emphasize that one could look at self-consciousness as a potential given, and not necessarily as an add-on to conscious experience. And this is, I think, a very interesting perspective. They also mention several interesting experimental results from fetuses and how they react to their environment and the timeline. So it seems that around the second trimester, fetuses start to explore, and they seem to be demonstrate goal-directed behaviors. So one of the examples is, for example, when they are touching their mouth with their finger, their mouth is opening. So that kind of shows some kind of anticipation and an internal model that kind of understands that there will be like a consequence of an action. So, and again, they also mention twin studies, and overall, yeah, they kind of point out that much of early conscious experience is not about vision, it's about tactile perception, proprioception, meaning sensing your body and your movement, and also like tastes and olfaction. And I guess, yeah, so basically just to summarize, with these examples, the authors, I think, make a very interesting case for considering alternative ways to look at consciousness and define consciousness, and highlight the importance of looking at different multisensory integrational processes. And yeah, I guess this is how I would summarize this paper. Do you want to, would you like to add something?
Not for me.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you don't want to add anything, then do you have any questions about the paper?
First of all, I think I understand what they try to say. But for me, it's a bit unclear why, or I understand the importance of body, and we should start from the body, or at least what they say. They introduced predictive coding for survival in environment, but a bit unclear the relation between the predictive coding and consciousness, and the necessity of predictive coding. It's a bit unclear for me. That's a comment, or if you find any like a sentences that clearly explain that relation, can you remind me that?
As far as I know, as for predictive coding, it needs the like prior information, right? So I think in this means the body experience or child or fetus experience is like were considered as the prior information. So I think the body experience and body or experience via body is related to the predictive coding or inferior or prior information.
I understand that part. So you're saying that the experience from, in early life can be considered as a prior in the predictive coding framework. Yeah, that I understand that, but I'm kind of asking, okay, then why do we need predictive coding to explain consciousness? That's the point.
Well, I think this, so as far as I understand the predictive coding and active inference framework, they don't specifically say that you need predictive coding. However, they kind of suppose that we have several evidence that this is how it is working in humans. And so this seems like a useful strategy to understand it, but I don't think it's a, a normative or a prescriptive theory of consciousness. I think it's more based on just describing experimental evidence and looking at, very kind of, common sense way of okay, what can an agent that wants to maintain its bodily integrity in the world do, and how can it relate to like its environment and to itself. So I think this is the basic idea, but I don't think it is prescribing this to consciousness as a necessary thing. But yeah, I'm probably just not familiar with the literature enough.
Thank you, Aniko. Yes, that's also my understanding. So there is no necessity of predictive coding to explain consciousness, but seems like the predictive coding plays some important role in like human body, and that can be or possibly applied to consciousness. So yeah, okay, then if that's the case, then I understand. Yeah, that. Okay, yeah, I can stop my clarification question, but if you have any, you can ask.
Just comment, but I agree with your agreement of the predictive coding, and so there are predictive coding is for explaining why the subjective experience, why there are difference between the subjective experience and the real world happening. So one is the explanation is that yes, there are two bottom-up external information and internal or top-down prediction, and they are integrated and they produce the conscious perception or subjectivity. So I think the predictive coding is used in the context of the consciousness, and also like the cognitive function or like the moving or perception and moving and learning is based on the prediction or predictive coding. Therefore, predictive coding is important in our field or consciousness field. My understanding.
Yeah, I think that is a very good point. I think this is so I have one question that I'm mostly curious. What do you think? So I actually forget to mention, but there's also some discussion about the fact that because like everyone is developing in a womb in another human body, there's so-called co-embodied roots of consciousness in a way. However, I was a bit I couldn't quite understand why is it necessary, or basically, okay, so what I didn't understand is I understand that a fetus, of course, developing in a body, and then it kind of explores the womb and its environment and itself as well. But I can't really see, or can't really, it's not really clear for me, how does the co-embodied perspective comes into the discussion? Like, how does the fact that it is happening inside another human being? I mean, they mentioned that there seemed to be like a relationship of a regulatory relationship between the fetus and the person carrying carrying it. I think, yeah, but then I don't really know, or maybe they don't really mention what is this kind of co-regulation, or what is that. And honestly, just based on the text, I could imagine much of this happening inside of I don't know, a jar, so to say. Obviously, like, there would be several biological limitations of how can you actually create an environment for a fetus to survive in, like, outside of a human being. But then if you could like manage this, then I think just based on this argument that the authors bring up, I can't really see the role of the womb and the person providing the womb, and so the environment, in a way. Were you, or I don't know, what do you think of this?
I agree with you. I couldn't understand that part. I mean, the fact is that everyone comes from another person, mother, in a sense. But in this paper, they just mention, and there's some interaction. Yes, I agree that, but there are no, I feel, explanation how that interaction, play a role for consciousness and things like that. And also, probably interesting point is that, okay, then, can we consider that state as two different consciousness, or just one unite conscious, or things like that? That's a kind of interesting discussion, but I don't think they mentioned anything about this. Ryoichi?
Yeah, but I agree with the author's point or thinking, because I think I'm a developmental psychologist, so this, and I think in this paper, consciousness means like the self-consciousness, different from the content of consciousness, and like in this paper, the reflective consciousness state, or something primitive self-consciousness, is birth in the womb, or up before of the birth in the mother's womb. And also, yes, the fetus have the neurons for perception. So they, I don't know, but they can see, or they can hear, or they can taste something. And also, it is important point that the fetus implicitly know who perceive it. So in this paper's points that the fetus implicitly know who perceive it, so it means that fetus, sorry, I can't explain detail, but so the who is important in this study. So the authors used these explanations. Is it clear?
Yeah. So do you mean that because like the authors argue that the experiencer, or the subject of the experience who experiences things, it's important, then the fetus itself becomes it's the fetus who is experiencing these like different sensory and actions and these things, right? Or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I agree that, yeah, this might be, or my point might be a bit of a, like, I don't know, just a bit too argumentative, because of course we know that yeah, it's important that there's a person around and coexisting with the fetus. But still, I am, yeah, so I'm also quite interested in this, because how, so I think naively people would think that you have the mother, person who carries the child, and then she or they have a consciousness, and then it doesn't really seem to be changing. But then, and at some point, maybe the fetus consciousness kind of develops and emerges at some point after explorations and after, I don't know, brain development. But then their bodies actually seem to be co-regulating or working in synchrony. So in that way, I don't quite understand how would the embodiment, this embodiment idea can be, how can it be understood in that situation? So do we have two consciousness if affecting the same body, or yeah, I don't know. And again, but I think it's a very similar question for example, IIT as well. Like, how would it work? Probably it would have two brains or two thighs, but then they are bodily the same system. So how can you differentiate between those two? Or I don't know.
I think one important point is that the way how they use the term consciousness is a bit different from probably mine and yours, because they clearly distinguish consciousness and experience, right? And first, I could not understand the difference between them, but after listening to Ryoichi's comment, if I interpret consciousness, self-consciousness or self blah blah blah, then it kind of makes sense. So probably we need to be or careful about their way of using the word. Or did they mention anything about the meaning of consciousness? I think they explained the meaning of experience and experiencing subject, but did not consciousness. So that it's a bit confusing to me.
So I think in the table where they kind of compare different theories of consciousness, and examining what do they say about the embodiment idea and the developmental considerations. They seem to differentiate between phenomenal consciousness, excess consciousness, and self-consciousness. So yeah, but I don't recall reading about this extensively in the text, or these differentiations. Yeah, but I understand that it's a bit hard to know what do they mean by consciousness and by experience, and I mean, I understand that they kind of propose this, that these are all the same or kind of the same. Yeah, in any case, yeah, I think it's very interesting and very nice to see that, like, this is just a personal note. I really like the fact that yeah, they have compared a couple of more commonly known consciousness ideas from this developmental lens. I guess it was also maybe practical for you, Ryoichi.
Yes, so in fact, I believe or I think consciousness. So I really agree with this paper and these authors. So, and also I think the process is important before of leading. So, and also in the development to science field, this like the fetus consciousness or self-consciousness is the main stream of the world consciousness. So I think so you and Yota or Aniko and I, and also I think the definition or approach of consciousness is different between our developmental science or philosophical one and the empirical or psychophysical one. So the definition is how to say, ambiguous in our, and and in this study the authors cited the Sartre's consciousness to soul or self-consciousness, and so I think the definition of consciousness includes the self and the content and relationship between self subjectivity and the content objectivity. So the authors are how to say confused, and I think normally in the philosophical or Sartre or existentialism or phenomenological philosophy, the consciousness includes the subjectivity and the how to relate between subjectivity and objectivity. So I think the authors argue like this, I think. Yeah, in fact, Sartre write or think the embodiment or body consciousness is, or the self-consciousness is more important in the for thinking consciousness or existence. So they also the author defied him so strongly, how to say, biased to the self-consciousness, the context, I think.
Yeah, that clarified my confusion. And as you mentioned, Yuji, while reading this paper, I thought you will like this paper because you are interested in self-consciousness and also you're working on, developmental psychology and things like that. So, but anyhow, we can just continue question and discussion. Do you have any other questions? If not, I have just some comments or question. So I think, I don't know. What I feel interesting is that, well, I understand that now people kind of, inclined to adult-centric and vision-based perspective. I agree that, and also I agree that we need to consider other modalities. I agree that as well. And what I feel interesting is that, the commonality among modalities comes from, embryonic stage, probably for some reason. But like if we take, again, the predictive coding framework, the prior can be from the embryonic stage. So these shared properties across modalities can be explained something happening during that period, or probably in this paper they mentioned the difference in development of modalities, or this different or olfaction and tactile develop earlier than other modalities or something like that. And that means that these two modalities can share more properties than the other modalities such as vision and things like that. And if we can say or find something like that, that would be interesting. And that's just my comments and suggestion. What do you feel? What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know exactly the exact details, but I seem to recall that vision is definitely in a underdeveloped stage when a baby is born, and I think it takes like weeks or if not months to kind of develop properly, and maybe also hearing. So yeah, so in that way, definitely tactile sensation, but and also like interoception or proprioception seem to be earlier sensory input into the brain, and thus probably influence the structural development of it. So yeah, I think that's definitely that's a very interesting idea to compare the different type of sensory inputs in a way of their developmental relationships. Because then I guess, even though this is the case, vision quickly takes over as the most important, or one of the most important, or resource-wise, like I think it has the most neural area allocated for it. So yeah, that's definitely a very interesting perspective.
Yes, I agree with you, and it is also interesting. But according to the researchers, for the fetus and the infants have the shared perception. It means visual information. If infants see visual input, or their visual area activated, but also the other area, like the tactile area, is also activated. So the early stage, in the early stages, the human have the like the shared neural mechanism for perception, and with development, the modality is differentiated. So yeah, and also yes, and the fetus study is conducted by the behavioral measure, not the neural activity measure. So the different stage there are different stage for modality, and I don't know but also the neural activity is more how to say, so differentiated or integrated. It's also interesting point, I think.
This is not true, but I heard that the spicy taste can be considered as a pain, which means a tactile sensation, right? And is it somehow explained by the difference between or developmental stage? I mean, in this paper they mentioned that the tactile olfaction is developed in an early stage than the other modalities, and that fact can be somehow reflected the fact that the spicy and pain is somehow related. Or does this explanation make sense, or is this not
Yeah, I understand what you say, what you want to say, but I think the taste means that they can discriminate sweet and bitter or something. So I don't know epic or spicy, how to behave children. I don't know, but yes, and also this point is so interesting. Tactile or relationship between tactile and like the taste. So yes, so if your idea is correct, or yes, the pretest or infant feel epic or like the tactile ache or something.
I mean, the reason why I raised that example is that before, or I make the comment saying that investigating the difference in developmental stage can be, interesting, and if you can find some shared property, then it would be, helpful to understand consciousness or something. But after saying that, I started to feel that, okay, then what can be a shared properties between modalities? And it's a bit difficult to imagine if we think about, let's say, I don't know, vision and tactile. If it's within modality, let's say the color, in the case of color, the blue and red can be, comparable, and we can, give some similarity rating between these stimuli. But if I were asked to compare, let's say, red and like this touch, I don't know, hand clap or something like that, then I'd say it's impossible to, give a similarity because it's from different modalities. And in that sense, it's a bit very difficult to find the shared properties or the commonality between different modalities. So I started to think about what can be, or what's a good example, and then I just came up with, example spiciness and, pain, but can be, irrelevant. Yeah, but.
So I think actually there's one potential idea in the text, because the authors define experiences as spatiotemporal events. So in that way, we could definitely say that any kind of or most experiences, depending on or regardless of the modality, I think most of them has like a spatial aspect, whether either within or outside on the body, or like, so it could be like a spatial aspect, and maybe it can have a temporal aspect as well. Yeah, maybe that would be something that how we can compare similarity. So I don't know, maybe, I don't know, 2 taps on my skin, on my hand, would be similar to something that happened twice close by. I don't know, that I can see 2 events nearby, or I can hear something. I don't know. I don't know if this makes sense, but in any case, I think it's, so yeah, so when we are comparing like very clearly like qualias, like colors, that yeah, it's hard to make any kind of comparison between that, just color itself, and any other like sensory experience. I see your point, but then if we go back to more basic features of the experience, maybe we could do some comparisons. What do you think?
Yeah, I think your point was really good, and I came up with one idea, and you raised it. You said that spatial temporal, and you mentioned the spatial example, but in terms of time, maybe we can, compare the time perception across different modalities. Let's say we show the some picture of video with, let's say, 1 second, and then ask subject to estimate the time duration. And this is for vision, for time perception for vision. And another thing is that you present some, sound with, again, 1 second, and ask a subject to, or participant to, predict the time duration. And, it's not that difficult to do this kind of experiment for other modalities. And we can just fix the time and then check, see the bias across modalities, and can see the commonality among modalities. That's a possible experiment, or I don't know. How does it sound? I feel it can be really interesting, but
yeah, I agree. I think with auditory, visual, and tactile, you can definitely have a very specific temporal. With olfactory sensation, it might, but you could use some kind of like breathing device where you can control the length of a certain like scent. I guess you could do it with some precision. Yeah. And then you can also look at sensory signals like your heart rate and something, or like these interoceptive signals, and estimate their, time length in a way, I guess. Yeah, that would be very interesting. It's a good idea.
Yes, so it is interesting. And the most popular study for infant is that bubakiki or figures something, or for children's study that like that, how to say, so, or round figure or square figure, and we integrated these visual figure and the tactile one, because circle is when we close the eye, but we know it's circle because tactile information is related to the visual information. Or so this figure experiment is, I think, the most simplest one. Visual and tactile and like the auditory information.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there's a lot of like it would be very interesting to do experiments on children as well, and do this kind of look at the development of for example, time perception. Yeah, I think that's definitely so. In a way, I really like that this paper kind of inspires ideas about different experiments. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
yeah, I think we've already discussed roughly 40 minutes, 45. So if no one have anything to say, we can finish here. Sounds good? Okay, then see you next week. Bye-bye.